environmental advocates and rights workers have intensified.
The coronavirus crisis is one of the factors threatening the education of millions of children worldwide.
Twitter is restricting free speech, and we at WION have experienced it firsthand.
Homeless crisis that predated COVID-19 continues to rage on.
I believe in human rights. I believe in fundamental rights and freedom core values that bind the entire human family together and which form the only truly universal language on earth, except sadly, perhaps and too often, except for war.
Just because of our color mean anything to me.
Sometimes, rights are defined as privileges, but when used in the context of human rights, it describes something more basic. The entitlement of fundamental rights that every individual, simply because they are human being, is called human rights. Human rights are the basic fabric of our society. They protect our way of life in the Philippines. They guarantee our freedom and allow us to progress through our lives with fairness and dignity. So much of what we do in our everyday lives depends on our human rights, and we don't always realize it. Human rights belong to all of us without discrimination, whoever we are from birth until death. However, assessing yourself in your current situation, do you acquire these so-called rights? Today, these rights help protect our private and family life and allows us to enjoy a free press. They give us the right to form partnership with and love whoever we want to. We have the right to demonstrate peacefully and the right to free speech. Additionally, we have the right to education, right to a fair trial, the right to vote in free and fair elections, the protection of law, the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and ultimately, the right to life. We should be aware and further educate ourselves of these rights because oppression exists in nearly every country around the world, and we have the opportunity right now to challenge those injustices. I believe it's also very important for each individual person to educate themselves on the rights that they are guaranteed and the rights that others are guaranteed simultaneously. Emphasizing one of the divine behaviors that is very prevalent in today's society is innovation. Innovation involves the acceptance of the goals of a culture, but the rejection of the traditional and legitimate means of attaining those goals. Meaning, the goals that we set are common or usual goals, but we achieve them in an odd and sometimes illegal manner. And I think that how social institutions should deal with this deviance is by holding people accountable for their actions. This includes deterrence, or more commonly known as punishment, which provides a negative consequence to discourage people from taking certain deviant actions. Incapacitation, best known in our modern society as placing people in jail or prison. And lastly, rehabilitation, whereas individuals that commit crimes enter a program where their goal is to understand why their behavior is deviant. As a conclusion, deviance is generally perceived to be disruptive in society. It can weaken established social norms and create division and disorder. But it also has other functions that are not necessarily harmful and may actually be beneficial to society. And it is on us humans to determine how we are going to take it as a positive factor rather than a harmful or disruptive one to our society.
Human Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings. We are all equally entitled to our human rights without discrimination, whatever our nationality, place of residence, sex, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status, such as age, disability, health status, sexual orientation, or gender identity. These rights, whether they are civil and political rights, such as the right to life, equality before the law and freedom of expression, or economic, social, and cultural rights, such as the rights to work, social security, education. They are indivisible, universal, interrelated, and interdependent. International human rights law lays down obligations that states are bound to respect. Through ratification of international human rights treaties, governments undertake to put it into domestic measures and legislation compatible with their treaty obligations and duties. Where domestic legal proceedings fail to address human rights abuses, mechanisms and procedures for individual complaints or communications are available at the regional and international levels. Human rights were developed and articulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. As a response to the atrocities of the World War II, universal human rights often expressed and guaranteed by law in the forms of treaties, customs, international law, general principles, and other sources of international law. International human rights lay down obligations of governments to act in certain ways or to refrain from certain acts in order to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of individuals or groups. To help ensure that international human rights standards are indeed respected, implemented, and enforced at the local level, at the international level, these mechanisms include treaty bodies, expert committees established by treaty and tasked with monitoring implementation of treaty obligations, and special rapporteurs and other independent experts appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council to investigate and report on pressing human rights challenges. We must not be confused about what freedom is. Basic human rights are simple and easily understood: freedom of speech and the free press, freedom of religion and worship, freedom of assembly and the right of petition, the right of everyone, the right of men to be secure in their homes and free from unreasonable search and seizure and from arbitrary arrest and punishment. What really is deviant behavior? It cannot be answered simply. Many factors influence whether or not an act is labeled deviant, including location, audience, and the individual committing the action. Listening to your iPod on the way to class is considered acceptable behavior. Playing your phone during your 2 p.m. online class is considered impolite. Listening to your iPod while on the witness stand before a judge may result in you being found in contempt of court and being fined or imprisoned, because norms change over time and across cultures. It stands to reason that notions of defiance will change as well. Years had passed. Schools in the Philippines had strict dress codes that, among other things, often prohibited women from wearing pants to class. During a war, acts that are normally considered morally reprehensible, such as taking another person's life, may actually be rewarded. The response of society to an act determines whether it is deviant or not. All societies practice social control, the regulation and enforcement of norms. The underlying goal of social control is to maintain social order, an arrangement and practices of behavior on which society's members base their daily lives. For example, shoplifting, a form of social deviance. It may be illegal. There are no laws dictating the proper way to scratch your nose. That doesn't mean picking your nose in public won't be punished. So, why people become deviant? When societal norms or place pressure on the individual to conform or obey the rules. They enforce the individual to either work within the structure that the society has established or become members of a deviant subculture. Deviance is a failure to conform the norms, rules, and regulations that are enforced by society and organizations. Some argued that the real problem of deviance is not created by a sudden social change, but by a change in the social culture or the pattern of social relationships in a society that provides guidelines within the cultural norms for achieving the goals defined by cultural values and to maintain societal stability that that holds out similar goals to all of its members without giving them equal resources to achieve them. It is this lack of integration between what the culture calls for and what the structure permits that causes deviant behavior or this anomaly. Merton described four possible types of deviant behavior, which can either have a positive or negative connotation. They are ritualism, patriotism, rebellion, and innovation. We are interested in the innovative part, which Merton describes as one of the forms of deviant behavior. Innovation leads to development of new means to achieve socially desired ends. Innovators look to fulfill the goals of society, but instead of going it through established channels, they find other means to reach their goals. Innovators strongly identify with the organizational goals but are actively seeking alternatives for the institutionalized means which they reject. Innovation it often leads to extension or intensification or enhancement of social rules. It has a positive tone attached to it. Hence, Merton's train theory implies that innovative behavior is a form of positive deviance because it violates rules adopted in a society or an organization, but at the same time is beneficial and makes a progressive influence on society. But innovation is still using unapproved or inappropriate or unconventional means to obtain culturally approved goals, just like cheating to attain high grades in school or spreading lies to become famous. And nowadays, we can observe our society just like everyone else on television. Everyone desired something or wants to achieve something for the society in a greater benefit for themselves. But we may not know their means or their channels or their way on doing so. We may not know what's behind everything. So it is important to keep our discipline and moral attached every time in our actions. But still, innovation is means of using socially unapproved or unconventional means to obtain culturally approved goals, just like cheating to attain high grades in school or spreading lies to become famous. Well, as of today, we may compare it to our politics, which we may not know what's beyond election, alright? Anyone or everyone in the election wanted to win, but not all of them can win. So we may not know what was their plan or strategy in running for their position. But always remember that no matter what you do, no matter action that are you going to take, we must always remember to put our discipline and moral action into it. Because as a member of our society, we don't want to become a burden or we don't want to harm others in our actions. Instead of using other unacceptable way to achieve it, why don't we do our best in attaining it?
Human rights may be influenced and secured in a variety of ways, thanks to new technologies. Satellite images and other imaging sources, for example, are increasingly being utilized to monitor and discover grave human rights breaches. Such photographs can eventually be utilized as evidence in the prosecution of criminals. documentation, and sharing on a personal level can swiftly attract public notice to specific concerns and abuses. Furthermore, technology allows people and activists to organize and mobilize in order to protect their rights. There are three ways technology can influence human rights. First, online learning and the right to education. The internet has allowed for the proliferation of online learning platforms all around the world. Since 2006, platforms like Khan Academy, which receives 10 million unique visitors every month, have been teaching children and adults. Second, big data and human rights. Thanks to social media, crowdsourced data, and monitoring devices on automobiles, mobile phones, and other sensors, there is now a large quantity of data accessible on environmental conditions, migration, and conflict scenarios. This data may be used through cloud computing and big data analysis to analyze significant trends and offer early warnings for critical issues before they happen, assisting in the prevention and speedy response to humanitarian catastrophes. Third and last, protecting human rights in the supply chain. Many businesses' supply lines still contain modern-day slavery. An estimated 30 million individuals are forced to work in supply chains, in sectors ranging from electronics to fisheries. Blockchain is an authentication technique that can improve supply chain transparency from source to client purchasing.
Deviant innovation. What is the true nature of innovation? Sociologist Robert Merton theorized innovation as a form of social deviance, in which the innovator uses abnormal means to achieve socially acceptable goals. Like risk, deviance can benefit or harm society. Dr. Santana's research distinguishes the bands and the tensions between innovation and deviance, unveiling the mechanism of the gray zone between legitimate and illegitimate innovation. The importance of human rights. Human rights are a set of rights which every human is entitled to. Every human being is inherited with these rights, no matter what caste, creed, gender, and economic status they belong to. Human rights are very important for making sure that all humans get treated equally. They are in fact essential for a good standard of living in the world. Moreover, human rights safeguards the interests of the citizens of the country. You are liable to have human rights if you are a human being. They will help with giving you a good life, full of happiness and prosperity. Human rights are extremely important for the overall development of a country and individuals on a personal level. If we take a look at the basic human rights, we see how there are right to life, the right to practice any religion, freedom of movement, freedom from movement, and more. Each right plays a major role in the well-being of any human. Right to life protects the lives of human beings. It ensures no one can kill you and thus safeguards your peace of mind. Subsequently, the freedom of thought and religion allows citizens to follow any religion they wish to. Moreover, it also means anyone can think freely. Further, freedom of movement is helpful in people's mobilization. It ensures no one is restricted from traveling and residing in any state of their choice. It allows you to grab opportunities wherever you wish to. Next up, human rights also give you the right to fair trial. Every human being has the right to move to the court where there will be impartial decision making. They can trust the court to give them justice when everything else fails. Most importantly, humans are now free from any slavery. No other human being can indulge in slavery and make them their slaves. Further, humans are also free to speak and express their opinions. In short, human rights are very essential for a happy living of human beings. However, these days they are violated endlessly, and we need come together to tackle this issue. The governments and citizens must take efforts to protect each other and protect progress for the better.
Human rights. Human rights are basic rights that belong to all of us simply because we are human. They embody key values in our society such as fairness, dignity, equality, and respect. They are an important means of protection for us all, especially those who may face abuse, neglect, and isolation. Most importantly, these rights give us power and enable us to speak up and to challenge poor treatment from a public authority. Here are 4 simple ways we can stand up to support and protect human rights in our daily life as a teenager and begin to empower people around us. The first one, speak up for what you care about. We all have something that we care deeply about, whether because of an experience we underwent, an encounter we have witnessed, or a story spoken by someone close to us. Advocacy has a huge impact in communities everywhere. Also, your words have power. The more awareness created around an issue, the more momentum there is for change to protect human rights. The second one, volunteer to a global organization. Number 2, listen to other stories. Lastly, stand up against discrimination. We must all think about new and innovative ways to uphold human rights and fundamental freedoms, particularly for children and us, young people. It is imperative to reflect on the great strides we are making to amplify our voices in the human rights space. People who deviate from recognized norms and standards, particularly in sexual or social behavior, are said to be deviants. Formal and informal deviants are the most common types of deviance. Formal deviation refers to when someone breaks the laws and regulations that have been put in place. Informal deviance is a state in which people break societal norms or engage in behavior for which they are not prosecuted. Significance effect of deviant behavior. Deviance is generally perceived to be disruptive in society. It can weaken established social norms and create division and disorder. But it also has other functions which are not necessarily harmful and may actually be beneficial to society. It is one way that social change occurs. If a deviant act becomes more accepted, it soon may be considered legitimate. Deviance helps people adjust to change. It provides example of alternate lifestyles and eases the stock of social change because deviance introduces these changes gradually. Over time, individuals get used to seeing different styles of dress, behavior, and etc. It also has a way of promoting social solidarity by distinguishing us from form or them. In this way, it increases social cohesion in the larger society by establishing social boundaries, defining what is acceptable behavior. Deviance provides a way in which some individuals and groups can introduce their agendas to the rest of the society and elevate their own personal status while doing it. These are the effects of deviant behavior. The first one, drug abuse. People tend to start consuming drugs to either seem cool or as a rebellion, and this ends up making them a junkie and works negatively for their health. Healthy deviance is also accepted in today's society. It is the way an individual or multiple individuals survives in a society that has negative social norms and beliefs by not aiding by them. Number 3. Deviance promotes social change and in turn helps people in a society who suffer from several health issues sparked because of negative set norms and rules in society. Lastly, deviance is expensive as an individual will have to go to lengths to break certain norms and can often be made to pay fines.